particularly pleased to have John Dean back on the program, former White House counsel in the Nixon administration, the author of numerous books, including Broken Government, How Republican Rule Destroyed the Legislative, Executive, and Judicial Branches. His columns can be found at verdict.justica.com. We'll have a link to there on thomhartmann.com. His Twitter is at John W. Dean. John Dean, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Tom.
Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
At the same day that I read your piece on Trump being the authoritarian ruler Republicans are looking for, I also read a fascinating and rather lengthy interview over on Daily Beast with the guy who just wrote a book about, or produced a movie about, I'm pretty sure he wrote the book, about the rise of Hitler in Germany and all the misconceptions that we have about it, and how basically, I mean, reading that piece, it seemed to me like basically what Hitler was saying was, the Great Depression is hurting us. The Great Depression was caused by those people. Elect me. I'm the tough guy. I will take names and kick ass. I'll get things done. No specific policy prescriptions, no 16-point plan, just I'm the tough guy, put me in charge. And then eventually, of course, he put himself in charge. And it just, it wasn't a contrast, the consonance between the two rather than the dissonance between the two absolutely startled me. Tell me about your premise.
Well, I did a book a number of years ago called Conservatives Without Conscience. And that's a book I started with the late Senator Goldwater, who was a longtime friend of mine, and his health got bad, so I put it on the shelf, and then after he had passed, I came back and returned to the subject. He was upset that the religious right had run off with the conservative movement and didn't think much of the way they were dealing with it. And as a result, he really wanted to understand what the hell was going on with conservatives. Right. When I got into it, I looked at conservatism, I looked at what the religious right had done, and it was about this time I discovered that social science for years has been looking at the influence and the impact of authoritarian personalities on politics. And the closer I looked, I realized authoritarian personalities are conservatives. Not all conservatives are extremely authoritarian, but most extreme authoritarians are conservatives. And that's where this whole thing started, was doing this book, Conservatives Without Conscience, where I draw upon a lot of social science, a guy by the name of Robert Altmaier up in Canada, who's an American who went up there and has done a lot of work on this for a lot of years, and he was very helpful to me as well. Anyway, that's where it started, and then when Trump came along, Scott Walker is an authoritarian. These guys, there are two types of personalities. Those who will click their heels, salute, and follow, which is the greatest number, and those who will click their heels and follow, but try to jump out in front and say, "Follow me." They're another breed of authoritarian. Those who you see running for office typically are those who want to jump out in front and say, "Follow me." Trump is a personification of the authoritarian personality. While I don't say that every authoritarian is a potential Hitler, because they're certainly not, that is the worst example of where the authoritarian personality goes.
Yeah.
There's a long answer to your
analysis. And Godwin's law and all that. I mean, maybe I should have mentioned Mussolini or instead, but we have an interesting relationship in American politics with authoritarian politicians. And can you speak to that? Why is it that the American people would want to embrace an authoritarian leader who is largely fact-free, other than I'm a tough guy, pick me?
Well, there's a lot of rather unattractive traits about authoritarian personalities, no question. What happens, the best numbers that Altmaier could come up with from a lifetime of study is maybe 25% of the American public leans towards authoritarianism. or has some degree of an authoritarian personality, which is not a small number.
Yeah.
And they're the people who are most attracted to the Donald Trump type, who want somebody to tell them how to think, what to do, to be a very forceful personality, to be the big daddy. They just like this. And when you really scratch the surface a little lower, psychology shows these people are typically rather frightened people. And this is what gives them some sense of security, is to have someone out there telling them how it should be and how tough they are. And that is the nerve that Donald Trump seems to have struck and attracted his core following.
And at the same time, you've got Senator Sanders out there saying, we're here to tell the billionaire class the party's over. You guys don't run this country anymore, or you won't if I'm made president. How is that different?
Well, that's he is not necessarily I don't find Bernie to be a particularly authoritarian personality.
Yeah, no, he's not. I mean, I know him personally. He's very collaborative.
But he is, he's obviously on the stump and announcing his position. Authoritarian personalities, it's not necessarily a pejorative term. They are very good in the military as generals. They are very good often in running businesses like Donald Trump or big corporations. So it isn't necessarily a negative to be an authoritarian.
Yeah.
They typically have not worked well in democracies because they just don't like to have to compromise. They don't like to not have their own way. And we're not, democracy is not built for extreme authoritarians.
Yeah, it seems that the difference between Donald Trump and, you could say, Bernie or any politician who is actually putting out policy prescriptions is that, to take Bernie, for example, he has a worldview that is clear, coherent, and he has been articulating for over 30 years. And he's saying, here are the policies that that we actually once did in this country that worked, that we need to return to. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is essentially saying, vote for me because I'm me. And now he's rolling out some policy things, but he's really, they're very much de-emphasized. It's just vote for me because I'm me. Am I getting the distinction here?
Oh, absolutely. Trump is clearly they're running something of a freak show. I mean, it's made for television. It's reality TV type of programming. He has not thought this through. He doesn't have any idea where it's going or how long it'll last. He's clearly not presidential timber. I mean, it would just be a disaster to have that man in the White House.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll go that far. But he might get the nomination.
Yeah, which might be the best thing for the Democratic Party ever. On the other hand, I was making jokes like that about Ronald Reagan in 1979 and 1980, and sometimes we have to be careful what we wish for.
Exactly.
It's a tough one. John W. Dean, I hope you're working on another book, sir. I love reading your work.
I am. I am deep into it.
Great. You want to give us any tease or?
Well, I'm actually looking at Scandal.
Oh, interesting. So it's certainly
there's been very little thoughtful work on the subject. We all know them and see them, but we don't know why they attract us or what they're really telling us all about ourselves.
Fascinating. Well, I look forward to that. John W. Dean, former White House counsel in the Nixon administration, author of numerous books, including Broken Government and Conservatives Without a Conscience. John Dean, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tom.
Always great talking with you.